The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. Welcome, the Agile Coaching Network. This is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. The Agile Alliance is a nonprofit organization that has been in existence since the start of the Agile Manifesto. It is a nonprofit organization, meaning that it purely works from the funding and the sponsorship of members, as well as the sponsors who, if you go to one of our big Agile Alliance events, either virtually or physically, you will see these proud sponsors up on the wall. That's how we gain the funds that we do for the mission. The mission of the organization, of course, is to help organizations and people to go build a more effective and humane and sustainable way of working. And that, of course, the root of Agile is one of the things that we said in the Agile Manifesto was that we want to go off and teach you a better way of working. And that's what we're doing here today, which is really cool. I'm joined by a cast of regulars, co-hosts, whatever we want to call them. Today we have Hendrik, Jorg, and Diana. Shauna and Linda are not here this week. They might pop in a little bit later, but always appreciate the effort and then the volunteer, coming in to help us to get the conversations going. So, together with what we're going to talk about today, I was having a conversation with a large Fortune 100 company that just went through a very major failure. And I can't mention the name of the company, but they were talking about how the project failed, and it was actually from an Agile organization. And, sort of this notion of, does Agile projects fail? Well, of course they do. Agile projects fail all the time. Matter of fact, all projects fail all the time. But dealing with that failure itself is, the frames that we see in there today was, anything from, projects of different sizes that have failures, they're whatever. But there's a lot of dynamics associated to that affect both team dynamics and also affect future projects and how they work. Also, there is a business component associated to this, and there is a team dynamic that happens sometimes where we don't want to talk about the fact that failure is occurring, and whether or not we feel comfortable with talking to management about, we did a customer demo and that demo comes back, and then suddenly we discover that there is no market value to what we're producing. So the work is good, the quality of the things that we're looking at are good, but the reality is the projects are going to fail. Whatever we think was the good idea is sometimes not the best idea. And sometimes in that whole market socio-technical fit with something, certain projects will come into existence at the wrong time. The market's not ready for it, and we never recover the development costs associated to it. So the questions that I have for all of us here today is, how do Agile teams deal with failure? And what are some of the ways when you have failure, how do you foster or help the team to foster future success? Meaning that if you've ever been on a failing project, regardless if it's Agile or not, you probably feel that, oh, why did I just spend all my time doing this? I feel a little deflated. What steps do you take as an Agile coach in order to prepare the teams for a brighter future? And then what are the Agile methods that you use to help to minimize the loss and the loss in the project? And so with that, let's see. Jorg, do you want to take a stab at this to start?
Yep, sure. So to say this, first, definitely I've seen my share of failures at different levels. So I'm not surprised that projects fail, even Agile projects. So one thing to recover or to pick up again from a failure is to really dissect it in a way that you understand what actually failed. Did I not hit the right business case? Did I do something wrong technology-wise? Am I too late to the business to make it really count? maybe just somebody else has a different opinion. So once I worked a year around the clock to get something done, and then our partner said, it's no longer our business to do this. That's extremely painful failure, but dwelling on technology at that point is totally pointless. And I think that is really important. And then after you understand what was wrong, pick up what is good. What did you learn? What kind of method did you improve? What was the wrong assumption you started with? And that's actually one of the key points of minimizing failure. Make your assumptions clear in the beginning and identify early verification points where you can stop and think, is it still true what I assumed when I started this? And whatever it is you see as risk or that might bring a problem to your project, make the assumption before you start working. Because when you first put your frame of mind together, there's no going back. You never understand what your gut feeling before was. That means next time when you start from a gut feeling, you can't learn because you can't compare it to anything. And that's the main thing. And then keep it short and make honest judgments about where you are. That's the best way to minimize failure, because most often then it's just a wrong emphasis and not a complete failure. And wrong emphasis is easy to correct, or more easy than to recover from failure.
Thank you for that. Diana, how about you?
Well, I suspect my answer to this is going to be probably the most obvious one that anybody gives. And it's whatever the outcome of your increment, your iteration, your release, your end of the big project after you think you've delivered this with a big bang. For me, always the answer is a retrospective. How did we get here? What were some of the things that happened along the way that contributed to that? And what is the learning we want to do, and how can we adjust so that this kind of failure, at least these aspects of failure, don't reoccur the next time we come together. And in every failure, there are always the bright spots. So what were those, and how do we preserve those in our desire to move forward? And how do we stay out of blame and judgment and into a more systemic view of how this failure happened, as opposed to seeking to find the single wringable neck or whomever. So whatever, like whether it's an Agile project or any other kind of project, or like you said in the beginning, all folks deal with this at one time or another. And so taking the time to learn from the experience for an individual team or for a whole organization, whatever scale, is really worthwhile. And you can't go back and change the past, but what you can do is influence the future. And you can celebrate the bright spots and try to preserve those. So that's that's always going to be my response. And I think that taking time to reflect is so important. And it helps take the sting out in some ways if we keep the focus on the systems and how the systems influenced people's behavior, and where the system had an influence that maybe, I think a lot about like the groupthink stories, and how did we end up with the Challenger disaster? How do we end up with the Bay of Pigs? How did we end up? I wish somebody had come up with some more recent examples, but the only way to figure out what happened there is to examine it and take the time to do that, and not hide our eyes and go into the three monkeys mode of don't hear, don't see, don't say anything, because that's the sure way to guarantee another failure.
We used to do something, and I hated the name. It was called a postmortem.
Right.
And postmortem, sounds like somebody died, and you're doing an autopsy on the whole thing, which was literally what you were doing. But what I found is that we would do all this great retrospective work, and it would get put into a file drawer and was never looked at again. What's your strategy of how you would make sure that that document or somehow that keeps living into the next project team so that we continue to learn?
Yeah, so for me, the difference between a classic, what I hear maybe there was a better postmortem in some world further back, but by the time I got into the work world, postmortems had become exactly that. A study of who to blame, which organ failed, and how can we point that out, and then let's write up a report and put it in the drawer. And for me, the difference between a retrospective and that is a retrospective is only what I would consider a real retrospective if action items come out of it. And that's true on any scale. So whatever we learn has to tell us something about how we want to adjust going forward. And that adjustment needs to start right in the retrospective. We begin that improvement action or that shift action right in the retrospective and then continue it afterwards. And then, depending on how big the scale is, I mean, if you're talking about a team that's doing 1 or 2 week sprints, well, they're going to check in the next week or the next 2 weeks, right? And maybe even a stand-up meeting along the way. But if it's organizational, then you have to plan in a check-in. And so in the past, when I've done large project retrospectives with large organizations, I mean, I've done retrospectives on projects that were over multiple years with scores, if not hundreds of people involved, then there has to be that, okay, let's look at it in 3 weeks. What will we have accomplished? How will we have moved this forward? Okay, in 6 weeks, how will we have moved this forward? What will we be seeing there? Do we need to adjust? Because it's a complex thing to respond to something like a failure, right? And so we also need to see, as we take our actions, what emerges and what does that tell us about how we need to adjust the actions that we're taking. And so that part, that follow through into action and the continual attention to that has to be there, or you have not done a successful retrospective.
Okay.
We've been talking, actually Esther and I and some other folks have been talking lately about, there's probably, in addition to the 5 phases of a retrospective that we outline in our book, that there's actually a 6th step, and that is the moving into action and the implementation of the improvement. Without that, you haven't really done a retrospective. You've not really learned and integrated that learning if it isn't propelling you into taking some kind of action.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Hendrik, how about you?
Yeah, I would have said retrospective, but Diana took it already. Which is not a surprise. I was hoping Ray is picking me first, but it's okay. But I have a couple of other things maybe about this. One thing is maybe about how to deal with this in a team. You failed, something is not going the way you were expecting, and so on. And I think there's always this moment of frustration what a simple practice I have used with the team I was part of, and that was actually, it's a fun practice. It is blame storming. So we feel like there is bad energy in the room and we need to get rid of this bad energy before we can really be constructive in retrospecting, thinking what can we learn from this and how do we move forward. So what we did was we said, okay, for the next 5 minutes we do blame storming. We invent and any reason and anybody who's to blame for the failure and the misery that we are in. So, and this is usually, it starts quite serious, and then you say, all these stupid people from IT and this and that and so on. And after 5 minutes, usually it gets quite cheerful because everybody in the room recognizes that this is totally inappropriate what we're saying now. And yeah, usually after 5 minutes, the energy is good out of that. So
that sounds fun, actually.
It is a fun thing.
Yeah.
Then to the other part, what agile methods help to minimize loss? Of course, retrospectives, but of course, you try to be proactive. And the good news is agile itself, agile methods themselves are risk mitigation or risk management methods. I mean, you use agile because you are operating in a complex environment. Yeah, there's a lack of predictability, so you will have surprises. Yeah, that's why you work agile after all. And agile itself, with its fast feedback loops and so on, and the frequent retrospectives, gives you a chance to minimize loss and stay on track. And for example, we have used in our company a practice when it came to looking, are we on time? I mean, we have a company, we have customers who are always asking us, when can we have this? When can we have this? So we need to agree with them on a delivery date, which is a bit painful when you're in a low predictability environment. So what we have been doing was that we said, okay, we are not giving you a delivery date, we are giving you a delivery window. We understand that you want to have this on the 1st of September, and we totally acknowledge it and we work towards it. But what we see at the moment, according to our current best knowledge, we can say we are ready between 1st of August and 30th of November. Yeah. So we have this window, and after every sprint, the team does a re-estimation of this delivery window, and that gives us a leading indicator for, is our learning in line with what we have been promising to the customer, what the customer is expecting or not, and what can we do proactively to avoid a major failure in the end. And through that simple method, we have now, I mean, the number of bad surprises stays the same, but in the past, we had one mega bad surprise 1 week before the delivery date. And now with this method, we have a weekly micro bad surprise, and because they are weekly and they are micro, they are manageable. So that's a way how you can minimize loss.
That's you know, I've always had the terminology that late is you've told me too late. You know, where I have no time to react, where I've seen with agile projects where you get that early on indication that things are not going to come out at the date that you think it's going to come out. Yeah, I absolutely know that's the customers then actually try to help a bit, which is kind of cool. Hey, Mark, you've had your hand up. What do you have on this?
Oh, I just would love to echo something I heard in Diana's response, as well as just who just answered? That
was Hendrik.
Hendrik, yeah. This idea of the complexity and adjusting for our change as we go, emergent outcomes. I'm just really excited to hear the phrase leading indicators. So leading indicators will show us things we can change to influence the outcome, whereas lagging indicators sometimes are, like you said, late, and then we can't do anything about it. It's already done. I guess we can learn from it. That's fair. But looking at the manifesto and individuals and interactions over processes and tools, how much are we interacting with, let's say, stakeholders who determine the viability of an outcome, a story, or something? And also, are we looking for failures ahead of time? You know, did I fail to understand you might save some time down the road versus, oh, I failed to implement it exactly the right way. I've seen teams spend time working a story, and the conversation sounds fantastic until it just happened last week. A stakeholder's like, I'm starting to feel disengaged because I feel like I'm describing something and I'm not being heard. Now, first of all, that was awesome vulnerability. And it was like, oh, tell us more. And instead of tell us more, another team member said, well, why don't you adjust the story for us? And that was fantastic. They gave the story over to a stakeholder, they adjusted it, and everyone said, oh, now we understand what you were saying. Well, I think going there, looking for the failures of maybe even understanding in the conversation can really kind of mitigate risk that comes later when it's too late to deal with. Just a thought.
No, I agree with all of those. Thank you very much for sharing that. Sheila, are you there?
I also can echo a lot of the things that have been said. One of the things I have a hard time with is like a full project failure, because if you are an agile team, as everybody's saying, I mean, you would be doing these retrospectives, you would be doing that feedback loop in order to adjust, to minimize that loss, so that loss doesn't keep perpetuating down the road of the full project. And sometimes it takes a while to get there, and it may not be fully successful because of those, bumps in the road that you have along the way. But when you get to the end, you should, for your retrospective, already have some of the items that you had worked with during that, in order to see whether or not you adjusted well when you were not doing things the way you should. And hopefully when you get toward the end, you have minimized that loss and have also already made steps toward improving from what you've been learning along the way.
So what you're saying is from the perspective of those retrospectives, that you should probably be getting rid of features that are probably not really resonating with customers and, responding to those customer needs. Is that your main reference in that?
Yeah, I mean, all of it. You're working on it. You're getting that feedback, and things may not be going according to plan. But again, agile plan is a very loose term, and should be, because as you said, you have features that are not. So if you don't need to spend time on enhancing features that you find out are not being used, because you're getting that constant feedback. And you're also learning from mistakes that you're making along the way and hopefully adjusting. And overall, the entire project, having an entire project be a failure is kind of a, how do you define failure? And is it a total failure, which is a very difficult thing for me to kind of get my head around. Or certain things fail, and how do you address those things that did fail?
Sure.
And so one of the things in the retrospective is to talk about the successes. What did you do right? How did you adjust during the project? What things did you do really well? And making sure that positive attitude remains. If you only talk about the things that went wrong along the way, then I feel like that just doesn't foster that future success. And you foster the future success by also talking about the adjustments that you made along the way and everything that went right during the project.
So I agree with that. I mean, I shifted even just the retrospective questions to, instead of, what did you learn? And, making sure that learning became the priority versus, hey, that didn't work. Well, what did we learn? Just a simple shift like that works really well. Well, thank you for your comments on that. I really appreciate it. Smita, are you there?
When I see the word failure, it reminds me of courage, and both courage and fear are contagious. I borrowed these words from Brené Brown, who also said, there is no courage without vulnerability, and vulnerability is the truest measure for courage. There's so many things that goes in a retro meeting, and I've been practicing and handling retro meetings in different organizations with different teams with different tools. One of the things that I know for sure is this vulnerability. We need to make sure that the teams have a safe space, which is so very hard to continuously maintain. All kinds of situations and people can damage it. And I have seen when there is fun and humor is involved, teams respond a little better and they let go of it is theory, but I've seen in practice. One of the things that I used to try was whiteboard with Speedboard Retro, just draw a board and use stickies. It used to be helpful. But we all know about all these tools. What I'm trying to drive to is the tools that we have had in the past were not really helpful. They never helped us to track the action items. and I have suffered myself. And recently, I came across something else which I tweaked to a retro tool. One of the things that our teams had concerns was it's a third-party application. We used to do Trello, pre-retro, all kinds of mural, and we used to feel uncomfortable. Who's the audience for this board? Now I use Microsoft Teams and SharePoint, and it makes our teams a little more comfortable. What I use is MS Planner, and they change the name to Task. Go to the Teams and just use the plugin. It is free, and everything is Task. You can assign the due date, you can assign the number of people, assign the names of the people, and we get emails. Hey, your task is coming due. And it's a task, but it's a retro. I thought this was very helpful because it is in the team space, and the people, all of us did not feel uncomfortable using a third-party software, etc., etc.
Sure. That's very good advice. Thank you very much for that. Tran, are you there? What do you have on this topic?
So basically, I'm a Scrum Master in a Scrum team right now in a new project, and for this particular project, we have a rich, like more big failures or success, but we are in the forming stage. I think like so from my experience, the way that the team can get over any failure is that do not consider anything as failure. It's like we are trying to do something and it doesn't work, so we need to find something else to do, and we keep like moving ahead by trying alternatives and see what is going well and what is doesn't going well, and that's it. We don't try to blame for someone to make failure, or we do not blame for anyone to have any like mistakes. So be positive.
Well, thank you very much for that. Skip, how about you?
I think failure can be logically defined as a difference between expectations and results. And sometimes it's important to remember that the issue may lie more on the side of expectations, although we have to look at both. In terms of what we actually do when something doesn't feel like it ended the way it should have, we will generally go into, it's the reflective model. I can't remember the gentleman's name right now, from Rolf, I think it was. And the three parts of that, when we're asking, okay, what actually happened, it helps to narrow the scope to focus on what are a truly positivist view. What are the things that we actually experienced in this? Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. And then to delve from that into, okay, well, so what are the feelings that were related to that? What did that mean to us when it happened? Rather than the practical effects of things that didn't go the way we expected them to. And then when we step into the third of, okay, so what? Now what are we going to do? It kind of assumes a sense of ownership over what our practices are and how it is that we can make changes in the future.
Those are all really good. Thank you for that. Tamiz?
I was just thinking about this, and I took a lot of the input from everybody who has shared the thoughts about the failure and so on and so forth. So now I don't probably have anything new necessarily, but I'd like to expand on a couple of the things that we talked about. And I certainly believe in transparency and courage have a lot to do with how we approach work and how we actually deliver. As the previous caller also mentioned, it's really lack of imagination sometimes, which leads to failure. And the failure, as the previous caller defined, difference between expectation and the results. And I wouldn't attribute to just the Agile team if things go sideways, don't go according to plan. And I believe it's the responsibility of the leadership at all levels to see and to ask the questions. that actually should highlight if we are on the right path or not, or we're getting the value that we deserve, and so on. The customers are in it as well, not just the delivery team. And so, they have a responsibility to ensure that, what they're asking makes sense and can still be done. And at a higher level, the leadership is responsible to ensure the teams have environments and tools, techniques, technologies to be able to do the job well and to continue learning. Because oftentimes learning something new is part of what we have to do. And if we are not committing to teaching or learning along the way, we cannot address failures or successes and so on. So that's pretty much it.
Great. That's great advice. I really appreciate it. Elizabeth, are you there?
I just wanted to come back to something that was said earlier around trying to guide conversations of failure away from blaming, judgment, towards more of the systemic issues. I'm a Scrum Master for an Agile team, and I've on a number of occasions had team members themselves volunteer, oh, I was to blame, I forgot to do this, or that was my mistake. And the conversation seems to end there. And it usually catches me a little off guard because I want to talk more about it. I don't believe necessarily that it's one person's fault. So I'm just wondering if this group had any questions that you would ask to again, try to get out this systemic conversation. So if someone says to you, oh, that was my mistake, I did that, what would you say in response that would allow the conversation to broaden a little bit to see if there was more learning there?
That's a very good question. And Diana or Hendrik or Jorg, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. I would thank them for their sense of accountability to the rest of the team, their willingness to be vulnerable and step up like that. And then I would ask the rest of the team, do you think this person did this alone? What else contributed? How else, how was this team member put into this position where this was possible? I love the story of the 3-armed sweater at Etsy, and I keep trying to track down the source of it, but the idea that there was a junior person who was left with the system to do something with the system over the weekend. And over the weekend, they took down their whatever they did, took down the whole site. And the CEO, everyone was like shaking in their boots. What was the CEO going to say about this? And when they came to work and called this person in, what they said was, "You showed us a vulnerability we didn't know we had. Thank you for that. You get the 3-armed sweater award," right? So even when someone steps up and says, I did it, it was my fault, it's like, what put you in the position that you could do something like that, right? That's the systemic view. And so I would appreciate them for their willingness to take one for the team, but still dig deeper into what conditions a behavior is a person in their environment. What environmental conditions were present that created space for this person to do something that they could take personal blame for? That's a failure of the team culture or some part of the system, the workflow or something that would put them in that position.
I mean, to add to that, I mean, one of the reasons why I borrow a lot from Lean, the Kaizen events, when you do them, tends to not put it doesn't put a blame on a single person. It puts a blame on, there's some breakdown in the process someplace that we need to root cause. And, that could either, whatever system failure it is a system failure versus typically it doesn't root cause to just one individual, like you just said, which is really good. Let's see, Rin, are you there?
But I just wanted to talk about the word failure. I feel that whether we are in an agile team or in life, I think as individuals or whether you're in a team, it's always a learning. And when I have been in, a Scrum Master within an agile team, I try and use things like try and change the language so it's more positive. So things like, what do we think we've learned from the last retrospective? And plus also, it's also the mindset. So when setting up a new agile team, it's also working with the team to get into that mindset about like what the previous Scrum Master, what the previous person was saying. It's just as a team, we all, we're all humans. We all make mistakes. But I think we all make mistakes in life in general, and I just think mistakes is just a form of learning. That's all it is. And I think the word failure, if it seems quite harsh, if that makes sense. And if we say how we can deal with it, it's almost like what is it we can learn moving forward. And I think that takes the edge off the team thinking, oh my God, what we failed, what is it we failed, and it really releases more of that anxiety. So moving here, it's more about, okay, fine, what is it we want to learn from this?
That's very good. Thank you very much for that. Heather, how about you?
I am not a Scrum Master or really a member of a Scrum team. I manage a group of BAs and QAs that are members of teams. And I would say as far as failure goes, one of the biggest things for our implementation for Agile in our organization is that definition of failure and how perhaps it's looked at as a cultural standpoint from the top down, right? I mean, I think we can preach all we want to Scrum teams themselves to say, we need to hold each other accountable. It needs to be a learning experience if we do fail. But I think it's a cultural thing across the board in a corporation. And secondly, I agree with everything that everyone has said here today in regards to failure. It's really not a failure, it's a learning experience. But I think having had been on Scrum teams, I think sometimes when there's a failure, you also have to definitely look inwards to say, what part did I play, right, in this failure, and then just own it and then move on.
That's sort of the shared success model, shared failure model, or shared learning model that's there, which is important. And then I found, by the way, with the QA teams in particular, I remember my QA teams would get depressed. They would be looking at failures in the lab and seeing just, and some of these mistakes were not really mistakes. They were either misses or requirements issues or other things. But eventually the team sometimes just needs to be taken outside and get some ice cream or something to improve the mood, change the venue a bit, and then talk about these things and get people in more of an open brain space. So yeah. I appreciate it.
And I sort of feel like with Agile teams, you sort of have to keep it fresh, right? So when you're doing a retro, you don't want to do the same thing every time you have a retro, right? Scrum Masters can really liven it up and get people more engaged so that maybe they will have more ownership and talk about those failures in a more transparent way.
Absolutely, I agree. Let's go ahead and pivot over to the next question. This one might feel a little bit early, but somebody asked this of me, and I was thinking about this might be something to go throw out to the team, specifically if you are currently dealing with an organization that is going to be returning to work soon. Here in the United States, we're finding that the companies are starting to talk about reopening offices. And those conversations are going on right now, especially in states that are reducing mask laws and as vaccination rates are coming up. And I know for some people in other parts of the world that are still dealing with COVID at a much deeper process, this is our hearts go out to you, and we understand, that this is potentially not a topic that you're even in your course of thinking right now. But the question is, my company is saying that we're going back to the office soon, but a lot of the team members have anxiety of doing so. What are other people doing to prepare teams to come back to an office? Hendrik, do you want to take a first stab at this?
I can, but I have maybe a more European perspective on this,
sure.
Which is maybe not so bad. So, I'm working for a very international company, and what we are doing at the moment, everything is still in the hands of the crisis management, which means ultimately the most important thing is the safety of our employees. So this is in the center of everything. So even today, people can go to the office, not in all countries, but in many countries, people can go to the office, but there is a restriction of how many people can be there. They have to wear a mask, they need to keep distance and so on. And like you said, in the US and also in Europe, we see the incidence values going down. There we are now looking forward towards making the office safe enough to so more people can start working there. But this is going very gradually and very cautiously. While in other countries, I mean, we all know about the devastating situation in India, which, I mean, it really breaks my heart almost when I listen to the stories of my Indian colleagues. And yeah, it's a disaster unfolding there. And there we are not talking at all coming back to the office there. It's simply the company is trying to help our employees to survive and help their relatives and so on. So the situation is very diverse at the moment. And in that sense, this whole question is not easy to answer. The only thing I can really say generally is we try to keep it safe for people. Yeah, so, and we are not forcing people back. That's the most important thing. Only if people feel safe, they are allowed to come back.
Okay, so you're allowing them to, their comfort level is being applied to this, which is, I think, really, really cool. Yeah. Jorge, Deanna, do you have an opinion on this one?
I have a rather similar perspective to Hendrik, but definitely one thing I would do is discuss it openly with what are the anxieties or the challenges people have, especially addressing the fact that mixed situations have their own challenges. So it's really hard if a few people are in a meeting room again together while others are remote. That just doesn't easily mix from technology point, and you need to take more care to have, again, everybody included and not have two parts of the team. So really make it a discussion and definitely try to understand both points. Why do people want to go back to the office? And a lot of people want to. Why does a company want to have people in the office? And why do people want to work from home? And probably there are two good things in there. So grab them and get rid of the bad things, and then you're better off than before. But I think in a way, it's just a retrospective about working remote and working together that you need to do and bring out the best with concrete actions.
I appreciate that. Sheila, you put your hand up.
Yeah, so this is really an interesting question because I think surveys have shown that companies are all over the place as far as reopening, some with going to some sort of hybrid process, but there are a lot of companies, including one that I'm working with, not for, that are considering bringing everybody back to the office in the upcoming months. And I do believe the teams are going to have some anxiety, and I haven't done this yet, but this is what I'm planning. And my plan would be to have a lean coffee with the group, similar to what Jorg was saying, like to discuss it, right? So create a lean coffee, discuss what did you like about working remote? What are you afraid of? Like, so have these different points that you have them put in, and then vote on the different topics, and then go through and have a discussion about how to address some of these anxieties, and to give other people the opportunity to talk about it, maybe give advice, and to get the team discussing how they're going to do it when they get back to the office. You know, coming up with the norms that they think will work for the team during this conversation.
If I remember, the most successful team moves that I've ever done, where we've moved, you know, either teams from one place to another, or just, you know, relocations and other things, allowing them to set the timeline versus us setting the timeline as management, is that a part of the open strategy that you're thinking about?
I would love to be able to take that back to be able to go through and come up with those plans and possibly bring them to the higher levels of management to say, what do you think about this as an option for coming back?
Okay, that's fair.
You know, and I think it would be great for the team to come up with their solution to it, knowing that they have to do it, what is going to give them that comfort level, and then trying to come up with something really good. And then also coming up with, when they do all come back, kind of redoing the team norms in this new kind of space.
Well, thank you very much for that. Lyndon, you have the last word for today.
I hope everyone is safe in their respective locations, given all that's going on during the current times. Try to make this short and sweet. I work for a major global organization, and in part, you have to commit to the staff because that is your front line. So what we've done is we continue to give them options relative to whether or not they want to come into the office, because we look at it from a viewpoint of separation anxiety. Some people need to come into the office, and some people on the mental health side and the phobias don't want to come back. So we continually have surveys. We give them that option. We stress the bandwidth of Zoom, having Zoom socials throughout, mostly on a Friday or Saturday afternoon, depending on the respective location, because we're in like 120 different countries. Since it's a fluid situation, we're permissible. We do a lot of also social events. When I say social events, like collecting cans and stuff like that for those that don't have, or collecting whatever we can collect and donate to the respective organizations to try to help in any way, because this has been a stressful time for quite a few. So one of the things we do is we have a parking lot where we give away swag to those that can come in. Now, certain countries have fluid situations and we can't do that right now, but we're permissible. We try to engage where even if the staff drives through for 30 seconds, they open their trunk, we take the stuff out, we give them a bag of swag, just a little giveaway. It's the little things that mean a lot, even if we give them like a gift card so they can go get coffee at Starbucks or whatever your local chain is. So it's an all-inclusive and it's an outreach, but there's a lot of moving parts. But between the executive committee, and there are a lot of people, depending on the size of your organization, that's willing to volunteer and commit the time. The only reward for this is the well-being of the staff.
That is awesome. I like the strategies that you have going. Unfortunately, right now we're at the top of the hour. I would like to thank everyone to participate. I'd like to thank the regulars. As always, you make all of this. And of course, everyone who attends makes all of this as well. And of course, let people know about the podcast. And we always appreciate you referring the podcast to other people. And with that, I want to say, everyone, please have a great month, and thank you. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.